Hi, so I'm Jasmine Weber, again, just in case you haven't watched my videos yet. My roommates are moving in and out, so there might be some noise, but just ignore that. Anyways, so this is for the 13 module on chapter 11, that thing. And I decided to go through the binge eating disorder. We've heard of like binge watching Netflix shows or like binge eating after breakups and those kinds of things. And so I just thought I would talk about that and discuss like it's the way it impacts us, like why people struggle with binge eating. And honestly, I think it's really common for people, just in general, to have seasons of binge eating. Yeah, so anyways, we're just going to talk about that. So what is binge eating? Well, that's just when you eat an excessive amount of food in a short amount of time. So, let's say you just had a really bad day at work. Someone who struggles with binge eating will go buy pizza and eat the whole thing for dinner by themselves. Or like after a breakup, like those strong emotional feelings, people who struggle with binge eating will go to food to kind of fill the void, to distract themselves. There's a variety of reasons of why it happens. But again, I think that's a very common thing, at least in America, that people struggle with because food can be comforting. Like comfort foods are a real thing. I know when I start to feel sick, my strange comfort food are cooked carrots. Kind of strange. But it is. It's what my mom used to make me growing up. So, and then binge eating in general, I know I do that with chocolate. If I'm gifted a large chocolate bar, I will often eat the whole thing in one sitting. Is that good for me? No, definitely not. But anyways, and so that's just kind of what we're going to be discussing. So common behaviors, I've already talked about that. It's when it says here, binge eating is usually triggered by negative emotions, such as stress or anxiety, loneliness, grief, fear. And so whenever one feels those things, then rather than journaling or taking a walk, jogging, maybe coloring a coloring book, rather than doing those things, someone who struggles with binge eating disorder will turn immediately to food. So yeah, and then that's when I said about the pizza and the ice cream, those kinds of things. Now, there are some long-term physical effects of this, obviously. If someone is binge eating multiple times a day, several days in a row, a weight gain is going to be one of the first symptoms. That makes sense if you're eating like a whole pizza for dinner every night because you're lonely. That's a lot of calories. And that's a lot of food, and your body, your metabolism isn't going to be able to keep up. That's also going to have a negative effect on your mental health. It's not actually going to be helping you overcome your loneliness, but rather it's just continuing the cycle of unhealthy habits. And then so when you are lonely and you're eating and then you gain weight, it's going to make you feel more isolated. You're going to be by yourself more often. So it's a very vicious cycle that is dangerous. And so weight gain is going to be the first thing. And so what I found interesting about this, though, is that we often talk about eating disorders as something that girls struggle with. Like that's kind of the stigma behind eating disorders, is that, well, that's a girl thing. Not true, for sure, but specifically with binge eating, the textbook, I found this so fascinating. It's men who are 40% of men like struggle with binge eating, which was a lot higher than I expected it to be. So, yeah. So then they just talked about what are some treatments. Obviously, counseling and therapy are wonderful places to begin. Finding physical trainers, that's going to be beneficial. Someone who can keep you accountable on a diet, perhaps. Whether that's a roommate or a family member, a spouse, whoever is in your circle, someone that you can start keeping a food log with, someone that you can even be cooking meals with, and they can watch you and you can count calories. I don't like that idea, counting calories. That just sounds miserable. But if that's what it takes, then that's what needs to be done. So yeah, it also talks about some like pharmaceutical, like there are medications out there that can help like cut the carve. No, what's the phrase? Anyways, it helps take away your cravings all the time, because eventually your stomach organ gets bigger when you're putting a lot of food in it. It stretches out, and so then as you are decreasing the amount of food you are taking in, your stomach is allowed to kind of come back to normal size. But that takes time. So yeah, I found this really interesting and something that I think needs to be talked about more often. Yeah, especially when it comes to guys, because in my experience, particularly in churches, like, the sex talk is for the boys, but the eating disorder and self-harm's for the girls. And I think we could do a much better job of having these conversations. And I think we need to be having better conversations with our youth in particular and young adults. And so learning about these things is really important for any leader, but particularly people that work with just the younger generations, because these things are really targeted for them. Anyways, that was just my short little synopsis of what I learned about binge eating disorders. But thanks for watching.